statement.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, walk us through the beginnings of this for you. What was your first introduction to this insanity of biological men with gender dysphoria trying to compete with women?
So I'll take you through my kind of timeline here.
Okay.
Started swimming when I was 4 years old, right? I come from a family of athletes. My dad was an NFL player. My mom, she played D1 softball. My oldest sister, she played softball, went to Ole Miss. My brother, he's in college playing football now. All my uncles won Super Bowls and all this stuff. So come from a family of athletes. Started swimming when I was 4, graduated when I was 22. So, 18 years of my life I really dedicated to my sport. Impossible to put in the words, the time and the hours and the dedication and the sacrifices that it takes to compete and ultimately be successful at the highest level. But of course, I was willing to do this. I knew I had to. Right? You don't get to go to prom. You don't get to have sleepovers with your friends on Friday night because guess what? Practice at 6 a.m. on Saturday. All of that to really say it's a lifelong journey. College rolls around. Truth be told, I really could have gone anywhere that I wanted to swim. I'm absolutely biased, and the SEC is the best conference. So I knew that was for me, but went to University of Kentucky. Could not have been a better place for me. Freshman year, right, there was a lot of adjusting. There was a lot of time and hours. I thought I worked hard before. I was wrong. We were in the water 6 hours every single day, with 3 of those hours being before 8 a.m., right? So you practice from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., go to class, come back, practice again from 1:30 to 4:30, ate your dinner, iced your shoulders, went to bed, did it all again the next day. We swam about 15,000 yards every single day, which is equivalent to like 10-ish miles. So lots of adjusting. Sophomore year, still improving though, still getting better. Sophomore year rolls around. I really started having this breakout season, started doing some pretty great things, really had finally developed like a sense of consistency, I think. And about 3 days before we were supposed to leave for our national championships, which of course, the NCAA, think about basketball, the NCAA tournament, equivalent in swimming, we were ready to go, the meet you work all year, really all your life for. About 3 days before we were supposed to leave in March of 2020, our coaches pull us out of the water, sit us down, say, look, if you live in the dorm rooms, pack your stuff up. You have to leave campus tonight. Of course, COVID had hit. I didn't really know what this meant at the time. There's still a lot of uncertainty around this. So I thought this meant we got a weekend off. We got to go home. We'd quickly return. But of course, that was not a correct assumption because upon going back home is Tennessee for me. Right? There were no pools open. There were no gyms open, nothing like that. And so every day I swam miles aimlessly in the lake. I'd put on a wetsuit and I'd jump in the boat dock and I'd swim down by Johnny Cash's house and I came back and I did the same route every single day. Because again, I knew that I had to. If I wanted to continue this breakout season I was having my junior year or my sophomore year into my junior year. Right? And the amount of snakes that I swam by and like dead catfish that are floating on top of the water that like hit you in your face while you're swimming is not pleasant. But eventually we were able to come back junior year. We had to deal with all the COVID theatrics, which I'll be the first person to say that being a college athlete, really being a college student, I would argue being a human during the time of COVID was miserable to say the least. But especially being an athlete, right, in terms of the mask mandates and the social distancing and the contact tracing and the mandatory vaccines, which, have you ever seen a swimmer in the pool wearing a mask?
I have.
You have?
I have. I watched videos of it.
Well, we essentially waterboarded ourselves.
It's so fucking stupid.
Isn't it?
It's so stupid.
Isn't it? So, but this dealing with all the theatrics outside of all that, really, this was the year that I won my first individual SEC title. University of Kentucky won its first ever program title in school history. And ultimately, I concluded my junior year placing 7th in the country, which I was proud of, right? You're top 8, you're an All-American. It's a pretty high honor. But I knew right then and there that I placed 7th in the nation my junior year, that my senior year, I had a goal of winning a national title. So that's kind of the backstory to now kind of finding out about all of this other stuff going on. Senior year rolls around. About midway through my senior year, I'm right on pace to achieve my goal. I'm ranked 3rd in the nation behind one amazing female swimmer who I knew very well because, like in most sports, your top-tier athletes know of each other regardless of where you compete because you've grown up competing against each other. So I knew this girl very well, trailing her by a few 100ths, tenths of a second maybe. But the swimmer who was leading the nation, by body lengths, might I add, which is a very large margin in swimming, right? A sport that's measured down to the 100th of a second. This swimmer was leading the country by multiple seconds, was a swimmer that I had never heard of before. And this is the first time that me and my teammates became aware of a swimmer named Lia Thomas. For all we knew at the time, right, keep in mind we hadn't seen a picture of this person or else things would have been a little more clear. For all we knew at the time, this was a senior from University of Pennsylvania, which is not a school that historically produces fast swimmers. Now I would argue is not a school that historically produces really anything good. Leading the nation by body lengths, ranging in events from the 100 freestyle, which is of course a sprint, and all the freestyle events in between through the mile, which, if you don't know swimming, right, think about this in terms of your Olympic runners, because that's like saying your best 200-meter runner is your best marathon runner. You and I both know that that doesn't happen. They're two totally different systems. But that's what we were saying in this person. So I'm scratching my head, right? I'm talking to my coaches, my teammates. Who is this person? We had no idea. And we continued to stay in the dark until an article came out. And in this article, very briefly disclosed in a blip of a sentence, as if we were really supposed to just read right over it, it says, Lia Thomas is formerly Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. And so when I read this, of course, I was shocked, naturally. But really, it was kind of like the sense of relief that I felt. Because at this point, I went to look up who Will Thomas was. Because admittedly, I was curious. Was this a lateral movement? Someone who went from ranking amongst the best of the men to now continuing to rank amongst the best of the women? Which is, of course, not what we saw, right? We saw that this was a mediocre man, and that's generous at best, ranking 462nd in the nation the year prior when competing against the men. But that's why I say I felt relieved, because I thought that the NCAA would see this how I saw it, and how, again, my teammates saw it, how my coaches saw it, how my family saw it, how anyone with any amount of brain activity would probably comprehend this. Look, nothing hateful about it, nothing even opinionated about it. The sheer facts on the paper in front of us that this was not a lateral movement by any means. But lo and behold, the NCAA did not see it that way. They saw absolutely nothing wrong with this. And so about 3 weeks before our national championships in March of 2022, they released a statement saying that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable. Basically saying that, look, there was nothing that we could do. As female athletes, there was no questions that we could ask or concerns that we could raise. We were told that we had to accept this with a smile on our face. So that's kind of the lead up to that national championships and really how myself and my teammates and really the nation, the world, actually found out about Lia Thomas. And I will say I'd heard of this happening in sports before, but I'd really only heard of it going the other way, right? So women, females who wanted to self-identify as men, then going to compete in the men's category, which, look, I didn't ever agree with. I never necessarily supported it, but maybe at the time I didn't see a problem with it, right? Because no one's, competition, the men's competition, isn't being threatened. So, I thought it was dumb on the woman's behalf, but whatever.
When did you see this from biological women competing as men?
Actually, in the sport of swimming, again, there is a swimmer from Harvard by the name of Skylar Baylor, competed on the women's team and then decided to switch to the men's team at Harvard.
But isn't there an issue, though, with steroids? Because if you're going to compete as a man, that means you're biologically transitioning. That means you're adding exogenous hormones, which would mean that you're taking steroids.
Right.
And you're allowed to do that if you're a woman transitioning to a male?
The NCAA's policy at the time was 12 months of HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and you can compete in the category that best suits you.
Right. So with Lia Thomas, I'm sure you got into this. What were the requirements that this 12 months? Is there an analysis of testosterone levels?
It was just 12 months. That's it. That's the only standard. No threshold.
No one is actually checking to see if this person is actually taking estrogen or taking testosterone blockers or doing anything. You just have to say you're on this program for 12 months?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not sure what the process looked like if they talked to Thomas's doctors. I don't know. But yeah, the policy that had been in place since 2010. So obviously this is a pretty old policy, 12 years at the time. That's what it stated.
So that policy's been intact for 12 years?
Correct.
Really?
And now NCAA, in true cowardly fashion, is changing course, right? They don't want to be responsible. They don't want to be accountable for this. So what they're doing now is a phase-out approach of this policy and leaving it up to each specific sport governing body to make their own rules, right? So now for swimming, they would resort to looking at World Aquatics or FINA, which is the international governing body. For soccer, they'd look at FIFA. For rowing, they'd look at U.S. rowing. They don't want a blanket policy anymore. And again, they don't want to be responsible or accountable.
So they're leaving it up to the governing bodies, and what decision have the governing bodies made?
Some have taken appropriate steps. I don't know of many sports that have been perfect, but swimming, for example, their policy now is if you've gone through male puberty, you can't compete with women, which they were really the first ones to take that bold first step in prioritizing fairness over inclusion. But the policy insinuates if you have transitioned by the age of 12, then you can compete with the women, which is not satisfactory. Even taking puberty blockers before the age of 12, there are still advantages that males possess over females. And even if they didn't, it's the women's category. Yeah. It's not for men. Yeah. So, and then you have other sports that have gone the total opposite way, like soccer, for example. That leave it up to, self-identification. Basically, you just compete where you feel best.
Oh, how convenient.
Isn't it? Which, at this national championships, right, this national championships where we had Lia Thomas, who is a man, self-identifying as a woman, we were told we fully had to treat this person as a woman, right? This same national championships, we had another athlete who was transitioning. But this athlete is a female who was then self-identifying as a man from Yale. Izzy now goes by the name of Isaac. And we were told we fully had to treat this person as a man. Optics purposes here, to give you perspective of what this looked like from our eyes. Okay, finals of the 100 freestyle. Top 8 women in the entire nation.
Air quotes women.
Air quotes women. Yeah, for those that don't have video, air quotes women. Top 8 women in the entire country. And you've got a 6'4" man in a women's swimsuit with a bulge next to a woman wearing only a Speedo with nothing covering her top. Your reaction was my reaction, because I'm sitting there watching this. I'm thinking to myself, it's me. I'm the crazy one. It must be. This is the freaking Twilight Zone.
How does the audience react to this? Like when Lia Thomas gets on the block, when they're about to start a race. How does the audience react to this?
as you can imagine, right? Like there was a lot of silence. A lot of people didn't really know what to do, what to say. There wasn't a lot of clapping. There was a lot of like protesters and like trans rights activists who were there, who were being loud, and the posters and blah, blah, blah. Lots of booing. Kelly J. Keane was there, who is a phenomenal women's rights activist out of England. And she was there, and I'll never forget, I'm standing on the pool deck. And at this point in time, like, of course, me and all my teammates and my coaches, we all knew this was wrong. But it's still, I didn't know how to talk about it or what to say or what outlet to go to. And I remember hearing her from the stands, and she just said something that we were all thinking, and she yelled so loud, "He's a cheater." And I was like, oh my gosh, I needed to hear that. So there was a lot of booing, as you can imagine, lots of silence.